Everything I'm about to say has happened, and everything I'm about to say isn't strictly in chronological order, but it's the order that I found them out. This is me retelling the story of what happened in the last month in my attempts to find work in China. Earlier on this year, I was given a position with Middle Kingdom Teachers, a company in the UK and America who find native speakers of English and teachers who want to go to China to teach English in schools. Now, their position and their role is to find us schools who are accepting of our needs, who are accepting of our desires, of our wants, and then they place us with those schools and we teach. My whole situation started out rather slowly, as you probably know from the troubles I had getting visas and paperwork organised in time for me to leave on the 24th. So I ended up leaving on the 1st of September to leave to China. After about a 30-hour flight, I arrived in Shanghai. My suitcase never turned up. I had a stopover flight in Amsterdam, and for some reason, the case was never put on the Amsterdam to Shanghai level of the journey. So I arrived in Shanghai with no suitcase and had to fill out the paperwork to then, have my suitcase returned to my next address. Because of the delay, I ended up missing my connecting flight and had to spend an extra 4 or 5 hours in the Shanghai airport before I could then get another connecting flight to the final city I would be hopefully meeting my team and my Middle Kingdom China branch in Changsha on the 2nd, which would be the Friday. I arrived very late on the Friday after leaving on Thursday to get to Shanghai. I arrived late on the Friday. I slept and woke up quite early in the morning to get picked up by a woman called Lanny. She apparently didn't know about my eyesight impairment. Now, pretty much all of you should know that I am pretty much blind. I have less than 3% vision, and all of that vision is directly forwards, and it is incredibly difficult to see for me at night. So I use the white cane, the long stick, you sweep it in front of you. I have one of those. So for some reason, despite the fact I filled out medical forms and did a criminal records background check and showed them my transcripts from my university to prove that I had a degree, all stating that I had a visual impairment, the company was unaware of this, basically because they didn't care. I was then taken on the Saturday from Changsha to a city called Hengyang. Hengyang is about 3 hours drive south, I think, of Changsha. I arrived there to meet the school, and it was around midday-ish. Obviously, without a suitcase, I didn't have to unpack, so I went up to the room that the school was accommodating me. It's a nice enough school. It had a gated community, to sign in with guards to get in, and then there was large playground with buildings surrounding it for different for different lessons. And one of the buildings was the dormitories, which included my apartment. So I went up to my apartment and unpacked the little I had in my hand luggage, which was a rucksack, and didn't really do much else for the rest of the day. Went out and got some food, got a phone, just the usual things. Um, on Sunday, I woke up very early, unable to sleep any longer. Kind of explored, did a little bit of reading, and was picked up by the assistant I would have in teaching, my translator, and we went out again and we explored a little bit of the local area. Now, this was a weekend, and on the weekend, some of the students who live further away from the school, because it's a slightly more, for whatever reason, they stay at the school and they saw me with my stick. They then told their parents that they had a blind teacher, and the school complained to the parents then complained to the school about why is there a cripple being allowed to teach at the school. Unbeknownst to me, this was going on. I did my day, and at 8 p.m. at night, I was given my resources for teaching. Now, I was expecting to have a couple of days to get over the jet lag. I was expecting maybe a week or two for training, understand the curriculum, what I was meant to be doing, be able to create my lesson plans, the full thing that a teacher does. No. So at 8 p.m. I was given the resources I was asked to teach without a timetable and was said to make a class. So I made a class. I made one class. I turned up for the class in the morning and did my class. I know it wasn't brilliant. It could have been better. Could have had a bit more activities in it. Could have had some more games. Could have done quite a few more things, basically. But when you're very, very tired and on very, very short notice, you don't think of that. You try to churn out something that fills the time. The director of the school had then turned up to witness the class, and my translator and her spoke for about 20 minutes at the back of the class. Near the end of the lesson and the beginning of the next lesson. Now, unbeknownst to me, I had a next lesson which wasn't the same year, it was a different year, and I hadn't prepared for it. So I felt rather good about that. I was then told on Monday night, so I arrived, let's see, Friday the 2nd, Saturday the 3rd, Sunday the 4th, so Monday the 5th of September, at night, I was told that I was fired. So I travelled all the way to China, and I was fired on the first day of my teaching because I was doing an unsatisfactory job and that I was damaging the school's reputation. I was then requested to leave, and that was the end of it. They didn't really contact me on the next day, but at least I managed to find a schedule. So I planned the rest of the classes and hoped that I could win them over with showing them that I was a capable teacher. I had spent 3 years, past 3 years of my life, becoming a teacher in a teacher training university and have the relevant qualifications to teach as a general needs teacher. But nope, they had made their decision and I was to leave first thing on Wednesday morning. Sorry, Thursday morning. The classes continued. I was hoping to win them over, but sadly not to be. And on Thursday morning, they came and not forcibly removed, but pressured me to leave the apartment that they were supplying for me. They gave me about £150, so maybe about $200 worth of Chinese money as a severance package, and then forced me to sign out on the register. Unbeknownst to me, that it wasn't actually a register, it was a termination of contract agreement, which meant they were no longer responsible for any of my paperwork and were no longer responsible for my person. So when it became very apparent that I was leaving the school on the Wednesday, I contacted Middle Kingdom teachers and said, hey, the school's letting me go for whatever reasons, can you find me with another job? Now Lanny, who was the Chinese branch of this company, said, yes, of course, we found you another job in the next province over. I was in Changsha, Hengyang, which is in the Hunan province. I was then sent to Pingshan, which is in the Jiangxi province. I then used my credit card to buy a train ticket, a high-speed train ticket, over to Pingshan in the Jiangxi province to then go to this interview. Unbeknownst to me, that to be a teacher or to get a job as a foreigner in China, you need to have 3 things. You need to have a work visa, which then gets turned into a work permit, so a work permit. You need to have a foreign expert certificate, which basically means that you are a foreigner with an expert in a field that is not available in China. Being a native speaker of English to teach English, kind of an obvious one. And the third one is a residency permit. Third one being that if the government needs to find you or the police need to find you, they know where to look. Now, because of this tiny amount of time, the very short amount of time that I was spent at the school, the foreign expert certificate was never applied for. The work visa changed to work permit was half completed, and the residency permit was also half completed. So when I arrived in Jiangxi for this next job, I went to the job and decided that, I'm going to hide my stick. I'd already seen that they were very prejudiced against me, so I was going to hide it. I got out of the taxi to meet the school, and they saw the stick in my hand and they asked me what it was. And I didn't really have any room in my bag to hide it, so I just said, this is to help me see in the dark. I have some visual problems. I said, oh, well, okay. Brought me inside, sat me down in the reception where I talked to a lovely woman from the Philippines for about half an hour before the woman who I was meant to be having an interview with turned up and said, we can't offer you a position. There was no interview. They'd never seen my resume or CV. There was no questions asked. They'd made the snap decision on my eyesight and decided that no, they didn't want me. So once again, I was stuck without a job. So I then tried again to contact Lanny of Middle Kingdom Teachers, and what it turned out was that because I had left the Hunan province and did not have a job with Middle Kingdom Teachers, I was no longer their responsibility. They'd wiped the hands of me. I have not heard from any of Middle Kingdom Teachers ever since, apart from one thing. Now, the person who originally hired me in the UK, I still had the email for, so I tagged her, Lanny, and him, the guy in the UK who hired me, both in an email and said my situation and said that the school in the Jiangxi province had refused to hire me due to my eyesight condition. Lanny, who then responded to the guy who originally interviewed me, didn't realise that I would also get a copy of the email that she sent to him, and basically said that she didn't know about my eyesight, that if she knew about my eyesight, she would never have hired me, and that it was all his fault, and that she's refusing to take responsibility for anything else that happens to me, and that she is recommending that he get in contact with me and encourage me to leave China as soon as possible. He turned out to be one of the best people that I could have possibly had as an aide. He went outside the company and found some contacts to offer me a position. And I went and talked with them that evening after being refused from the second school, and it sounded like a more of an outside of school program where people of varying degrees of English would come and they would meet and we'd have general conversations where I would be able to teach them English through moving around, going to coffee shops, walking, sitting in parks, and it sounded perfect to me. You know, there was no curriculum to work with, it was just developing people's English and they would pay for the private tutoring of my time. I agreed to the job and they said they would draw up a contract, they said they would find me a place to stay. So, you know, this was perfect for me. I then, the next day, this would be perhaps, I think this was the Saturday, I was picked up by them and taken to a nursery. Now, on the pretext, that I was taken to the nursery on the pretext that I was going to meet another foreigner, a guy called Matt. And I met Matt, and he was there, and I figured he was working with the same company. But actually, it turns out that he had been hired by the two that were meant to be hiring me to work in the nursery over the weekend as part of I don't even know what it could have been. It was just an activity centre, I suppose. He was getting paid for it. So when I was asked, you know, I'm here working as well, am I getting paid? He turned around with a very big smile on their face and said, no. Let's go back a little bit now. Before I left the UK, I was given about £100, maybe about $120, $130 worth of Chinese money, RMB, which equates to about 1,000 RMB. Now, China is fairly cheap, but after a week of constant travelling, of paying my own way, of paying hotels, of paying for food, I was running low on money. The school did give me about another £150 worth of compensation severance package, but it wasn't going to last. So I decided I was going to try and get some money out of my bank. I went to some of the local banks in Pingxiang, and in doing so, I discovered that my card had been blocked. Now, the reason for this card had been blocked was because the first school in Hengyang, the one that had fired me after only one class, so after only one day, had decided to try and charge me rent for my brief stay in their apartment. My bank, rightfully so, said, hold on, this isn't right, and had blocked the card and blocked the transaction, so then I couldn't get access to any more money. So now I am in China with about £200 worth of money, about 2,000 RMB, and that's all I have to my name. I've then been tricked into working 2 days for free at a nursery and not getting paid for it. Now, Matt was very generous and talked me and helped me get back to a larger city because he rightfully so realised that Pingxiang is not a very big city and there wasn't a large amount of opportunity for someone like myself to find work. He suggested I go back to Changsha, where I originally landed on my connecting flight, to get to basically, because it's a bigger city, there's more employment opportunities. He showed me on a job website and I started firing off my resume, my CV, left, right, and centre to applying to a bunch of jobs. And I did get quite a large amount of success. So skip forward a couple of days, I'd gone to a couple of interviews, I'd gone with Matt, and I checked into a hostel, which wasn't particularly expensive. It was about 118 per night, but that leaves me with only about, 20 nights if I don't eat. So maybe about 15 nights if I consider eating. So I've got about 2 weeks before I am completely out of money and completely stuck. So I decide that I'm going to give myself 3 or 4 days to go to the interviews and meet as many people as I can, meet as many foreigners as I can, get some friends, get some contacts, hopefully find a cheaper hostel, and I'll pick a job. So I went with a couple of foreigner friends and I met my new friend Enzo. Now Enzo directed me to a cheaper hostel, which is only 30 RMB per night, which works out at about £3 per night. And I said, brilliant, I'll move there as soon as my rent is paid up from this other hostel. Meanwhile, I'd gone and talked to a few people and had a few interviews, and I was interviewed with a high school. Now, most of my experience in teaching has been revolved around this slightly older age group. I'm not very good with young kids. I can, but seeing as I'm going to be teaching English, I didn't really have a lot of very small, child-friendly games that would lend to teaching English very well. I have games that work in maths or in English when you're reading and writing, but speaking games, there's not generally that many. I'm not really trained for that sort of thing, so I was pretty sure I was going to be working with this Chinese high school. I didn't want to cut my losses. I wanted to go to another couple of interviews, and I went to an interview with a woman, Carolyn, and a man, Nick, from Canada and America, respectively. And they offered me a position which was completely to my standards. Smaller class sizes, it was less hours, but with a similar pay, and the fact they spoke English and fully understood my situation, or at least my situation up to this point. They were very sympathetic and they wanted to help. So I decided to go with them. The next day, I went and met up with them. Well, when I say next day, actually, it was later that same day, after the interview, and I accepted the position, that I'd gone and showed them all my paperwork, and they realised that my foreign expert certificate was missing, that I didn't have my work permit, I still had my work visa, and my residency permit wasn't on my person. So they started calling around and called my agency, who refused to answer my calls, but because it was a different number, Carolyn was able to get through to them. And then on top of that, the school was refusing to release my paperwork because if they released the paper, they couldn't really. There's no real way to release the paperwork. They could either cancel it, and then the government would ask why they'd be cancelled, or they can complete it and then revoke it, which would again have the government questioning why it happened. Now, for obvious reasons, it's illegal in every single country in the world to fire someone for a discriminatory reason for having a disability. But because I hadn't registered with the police, I hadn't registered with the government, and there was a lot of question marks put on my passport and my name and my visa while I was in China, there were suddenly mounting fines being incurred on my head because the company, Middle Kingdom Teachers, and the school, the Hengyang School for Foreign and English Learning, were committing the crimes in my name. The fine was landing on my head rather than on them. So the next day, we went to the Chinese embassy to try and figure out what was going on, and to try and get some new paperwork and to get the paperwork back in my control, so then we could fill out to get this new position. Didn't go that way. I arrived at the first Chinese consulate and they didn't have the right services at there, so we travelled to the next one. We went to the next Chinese consulate, and a very similar situation happened, despite the fact that we knew full well that they had the power and the authority to force the school to give me my paperwork, for my British person. They refused to do so, obviously, because by this point there was a £5,000 to £10,000 fine on my head if I tried to leave China. So they were quite happy just letting that fine increase and increase until I was forced to leave because my work visa would expire within 1 month of my entry to China. So I had until the 2nd of October to get all this paperwork back or face £5,000 to £10,000, and if I was unable to pay that, which I am, because I can't get access to my money, it would incur jail time. So we then contacted the British Embassy and we went over there and we had an emergency appointment with them and we talked to them. And the British Embassy turned round to me and said that it isn't within their jurisdiction to help me. because it is an employee-employer dispute and the crime has not been committed, and that I have not committed the crime, and there's no police currently searching for me, despite the fact that the fines were currently mounting and mounting and mounting because of the amount of time I'd stayed in China without having my residency permit created. I had then, with Carolyn, had been incredulous towards the British Embassy in China and said, "So you're telling me that without any suitcase, without any money, without any permanent address, without anything, and a 5 to 10,000 pound fine put on my head and possible jail time, you cannot help me?" And they responded yes. So for the next 3 or 4 days, we battled with the embassies, we battled with the school, we battled with Middle Kingdom teachers to try and get my paperwork back in my name. Unfortunately, there was a Mid-Autumn Moon Festival happened, which celebrates the equinox at this time of year. So all government buildings and larger institutions closed. So we had a 5-day wait. Meanwhile, I was still running out of money. So what I started to do was I started searching for cash-in-hand jobs. Now the cash-in-hand jobs were not exactly lucrative, and despite how cheap China was, I was down to less than 200 or 300 RMB, less than 20 or 30 pounds. So I started desperately searching. I was accepting any job I could find. I went down from my usual 3 meals to 1 meal per day because I couldn't afford to do anything else. I couldn't afford to buy water, and you can't drink the water from the taps in China. So I started boiling water in kettles and filling up bottled water so I could stay hydrated in a 35 to 42 degrees Celsius heat. Meanwhile, I still have no clothes. So what I'd been doing was, in that first couple of days when I realised that I had, no clothes and very little money, I decided I was going to buy myself a t-shirt and a set of shorts because I travelled in a t-shirt and a set of jeans. So I had 2 t-shirts and 1 set of shorts to my name, along with 2 sets of underwear and 2 sets of socks, and luckily 2 pairs of shoes. I would go into the shower every night and wash myself fully clothed and wash my clothes in the shower with a shampoo, hang them up to dry, wash myself, wake up in the morning and put on either the clean t-shirt and the damp shorts, or if I was lucky the shorts were dry, and I'd go out into the world for the next day. I would stay in the air conditioning as much as possible. I would do as little as possible to try and stave off the hunger, but hunger cramps eventually started to set in, and dehydration set in a couple of times, to the point that I was dizzy and I had I wouldn't say I passed out, but I had a very serious case of room spin, and I had to find some shade. I sat down just in the middle of the street, basically, on one of the trees that had been planted on the side of the road to try and calm myself down and get myself back in order before I continued. I started doing some cash in hand jobs and I managed to find myself one, so I managed to get myself an extra 400 RMB, so I was back up to above 500. The 5 days have passed, and that's how I was able to find the work. And with the company that was willing to hire me, this Carolyn and Nick, we'd finally come to the conclusion that there wasn't much I could do. Because of how much damage that had been done to my visa, and because of the fact that I had no residency permit and no foreign export certificate, and couldn't then apply for a residency permit or a foreign export certificate, there was little hope for me to stay in China. But the fine was still there and still mounting, and if I went to the border, I would have then obviously walked into the hands of the police and they would have been able to charge me point blank because I was hiding out in one of the big cities and no one really had my address, no one really knew where to look for me because my last registered location was when I arrived in Pingchang, back in the Jiangxi province, when I'd applied for them, when I'd used my passport to get the train to Changsha. They didn't know what stop I was getting off at, and they didn't know where in if they did know which stop I was getting off at, they didn't know where in Changsha I would be. So once again, I'm running low on money, I'm running low on time. My friends have been helping me. They bought me some McDonald's, they bought me some drinks and some water, but the stress had mounted to obvious reasons. I had now passed the 2.5 week mark in China, and I was still only eating 1 meal per day, and I had been doing for the last 10 to 14 days. I'd I was running out of time and running out of money, and I'd finally been able to establish some communications. Now, a lot of you have probably been wondering, why have I not called home? Surely you could have called home. Unfortunately, Chinese SIM cards, which is the one I bought because I was going to be there for a year and there was no point in taking my British SIM with me for the extreme costs, does not call outside of China. So I couldn't call home to alert anyone about my information. And there was a block on all Google related services, including Facebook, so I couldn't contact home. I was luckily able to get some emails sent from my friend's laptop, who would then bounce it round a couple of people that he knew to be able to send it back to the UK and alert my parents what was going on. They then managed to get me the contact information from the bank, and adding some credit to my Skype, I was able to call home and get and lift the ban on my credit card. So I finally had money again, but this had approached the 3-week mark of me being in China. Luckily, Carolyn had taken over from Middle Kingdom, taken over from my school in search of my suitcase, and my suitcase did turn up in my 3rd week of being in China. I was able to dress, I now had clothes, I now had money, I now had a place where I could stay at. Some good friends were looking out for me and were helping me as much as they could. And in a way, we had tricked the American and Canadian embassies into believing that I was already an employee of the school, had someone committing fraud on my account. We managed to get the fine removed, and my visa, which had been broken and which have had me detained or sentenced to prison or would have revealed all the issues, we had it refloated, I suppose is the best way to put it, so that instead of having just the work visa, I had partly of a tourist visa. The whole thing wouldn't hold up under intense scrutiny, but at least the police would no longer be looking for me. We realised that to get my new visa, I'd have to come home and start over, so I was looking for flights. And the cheapest flights by a large mile would come from Hong Kong, and with the high-speed rail networks being able to link Changsha, the capital of Hunan, to Hong Kong quite easily, we decided I would go to Hong Kong. So I packed up a large majority of my clothes from my suitcase into my friend's travel rucksack. I took his laptop bag and put my laptop in it along with my paperwork and went for the border in Hong Kong. I arrived in Hong Kong after the 5 or 6 hour train ride, and got to the border and came to immigration control and was asked by the police and was detained. I was detained for about an hour with intense scrutiny over my situation because of all the red flags that had been raised on my account. Luckily, the fine was removed, and basically the main reason for the fine being removed was that the company that hired me had some Chinese-speaking people and were able to talk to the Chinese embassy on my behalf and had the fines removed. Didn't save me from the detainment in the hour. This would be coming up to maybe the 24th of September, maybe the 25th. I then moved over to the Hong Kong border and was detained again. I had intense questioning, different questions, similar questions, the whole thing. And eventually they said that, they knew to get into Hong Kong I needed to say where I was going to be staying. So I had to check myself in online to a hostel that my friends had just recommended for me. So they said, okay, well, don't go too far because we might be needing you for questioning. Earlier that year, in my final part of my master's degree, I had a friend who did study abroad who actually came from Hong Kong. So I got in contact with her and said, hey, I'm in Hong Kong, would it be possible to meet up? And I was quite lucky that the area of Hong Kong that I was staying for my hostel was not too far from where she stayed. So we met up, had a very nice evening, and we agreed to meet up for breakfast the next day. So I went back to the hostel and had a little bit of had a nice time with some of the people, and left them to go to sleep. Woke up quite early in the morning the next day to go to breakfast, and the way the hostel was set out was it was down a side street, kind of an L shape. So if the hostel was on this street here, I was standing here waiting for my friend in the taxi because this is the main road. As I was standing here, I noticed a police car come from this direction, very slowly with the sirens on, and turn up. And two police officers went into the hostel. I'm thinking to myself, oh, for God's sake. I just completely given up at that point. I just stood there and I was just waiting for the shit to happen that had been mounting this entire time. At that moment, my friend's taxi turned up, and I very quickly got into the taxi. We very quickly left the area, and I hid away from the hostel for the rest of the day. I returned very late at night to sneak in, pretty much in the cover of darkness. There was no police, there was no one even on the reception desk because it was that late. I slept fitfully for about 3 hours until about 3:30 in the morning before I woke up and packed my things and got on the night bus to go to the airport. I hid in the airport for a couple of hours before checking in and left Hong Kong to fly to the Philippines and then the Philippines to London and arrived back in the UK on the 28th of September 2016 at 9 in the evening. Now, I hope that this story is completely believable, as incredulous as the whole thing is, basically. I scarcely believe it myself. The drama and the stress that I was under, the constant poor night's sleep, only eating one meal per day, having diarrhea because of it, dehydration, uh, access to no money, sleeping rough for a night or so. The whole thing just didn't allow me for any form of writing in any capacity, and I'm really hoping that you guys can sympathize that I'm going to be taking a couple of days to get back over my jet lag and to let the stress fully release. I've come down with quite a serious cold, now that I've returned home because of the amount of stress I was under. You know, my immune system was shot to all hell, and now that I've finally reached a point where I can relax and stop, my body's just gone completely flat. I hope that you can sympathise with me, and I'm hopefully able to get some of your support in emails and feedback because I love hearing from you guys. I probably the story is currently sitting around 24,000 words, and I don't know when it will eventually be able to post. I've not heard from my editors because I use Gmail, which was blocked. I'm going to try and get in contact with them over the next couple of days to see where I'm at, but I'm in absolutely no rush to get myself involved in anything until I know what my future is. I've only been back 3 days um, after all the incredibleness that I've been through. Despite all the friendships I've made and the people I've met were incredible, and the experience, despite everything, has given me one hell of a story. But yeah, I'll leave you with this, and I hope that your day has gone significantly better than mine, and I hope that your September has gone significantly better than mine. Um, Hope to hear from you all, and yeah, I'll leave you at that. Bye.